In the forest at night, the boy stabs a giant wolf with his sword. Two more approach and he points at them asking, "Who's next?" They zigzag toward him. He stares them down. The beasts leap. He pierces another in the head. A sword slash to the eye. A spinning strike. Another bite to the side, but he shoves the sword through its throat, painting the ground red. Finally it seems over, until the boss shows up. The beast says it's thanks to this cursed boy that he knows the letter was true. But before this bloody fight we have to go back a few days. Percus, our protagonist, was celebrating the end of exams. His friend Celine Haster told him to calm down because it was still the middle of the school year. Another drunk friend told her to let the boy enjoy himself. That was Leto Einster. Ian wasn't the best at academics, but thanks to his horseback skills and quick footwork, he managed to pass. The two celebrated like idiots, happy to be at the best academy in the empire. Celine scolded him. "You idiot, stop acting like a fool. Tomorrow morning we still have class." She stormed off. "Fine then. I'm going to sleep. See you tomorrow," Ian muttered. Later that night in his room, Ian regretted choosing morning classes, calling it the worst decision ever. He threw himself onto the bed. But as soon as he slept, a vision appeared before him. A name glowed, Delphiran. In a ruined world full of corpses, someone identical to Ian stood up and said that Delphiran was coming, and unless Ian stopped him everything would end. Meteors rained down, and Ian woke up suddenly. "What kind of dream was that?" "Delphiran. I've never even heard that name, probably just because I drank too much." Then he noticed a letter on his desk. Strangely, the calendar showed that a whole week had passed. Confused, he picked up the letter. The handwriting was delicate, likely from a girl. Could it be a love letter from one of the academy's beauties? He thought about skipping class but couldn't resist reading it. The letter read, "I once thought this was nothing more than a childhood fairy tale. I never imagined our names would be recorded in history books. Tonight I will dream of you again." It was signed CFIA year 57T1 of the imperial calendar. Ian checked his calendar and noticed the dates didn't match. Whoever this crazy girl was, she had put a lot of effort into the letter, but not enough. Another part of the letter warned that if the future wasn't protected, the world would perish. He laughed, crumpled the paper, and wondered who writes such a weird love letter. On his way outside, Ian noticed people staring at him. Looking down, he realized he was carrying a battle axe. Where did this even come from? Everything's been so strange lately. Suddenly he saw Leto and Celine. He called out to them, but they turned away, not wanting to deal with him. "Let's ignore him," Leto whispered. "Better than getting dragged into his weird stuff." Celine agreed. Ian shouted, "Hey you bastards, look over here." At that moment, Leto noticed something strange. He ran up to Ian, hugged him, and said, "Finally, you're no longer possessed." Ian pushed him away. "Get off me, idiot." Then he looked at Celine and asked, "What the hell is this guy talking about?" She replies that he had been possessed for a whole week, completely confused. Leto says, "A week? But the last thing I remember is saying goodnight to you after drinking." At that moment, Celine shouts that the bastard really doesn't remember anything he did. Leto explains that because of Ian, the reputation of the three of them is completely ruined at the academy. The plan was to take him to an exorcist, but every time they tried, he threatened them with that axe. Ian looks down at the weapon, wondering if this is the one they mean. They tell him to put it away since they already have trauma from it. The protagonist is totally confused, trying to understand what this whole possession thing means. He doesn't remember a single thing, though he suspects it might be connected to that nightmare he had. Leto celebrates that it's finally over, and Celine agrees at least it ended before another incident happened. Ian, curious, asks, "What incident did I cause?" His friend explains that he did the unthinkable. He beat up the #1 student of the second year. Ian can't believe it. That girl is famous for awakening her aura early. Everyone calls her the sword monster of the second year. Sakria Yerdina, of course, he says. "You must be joking. There's no way I beat someone like her." But Celine insists, saying not only did he beat her, but the girl has been in the hospital for a week. She then asks Ian what he's planning to do now. Confused, He asks why he should have to do anything. Celine explains that in today's fencing class, he's going to face her again. We then see poor Sakria, still weak, stumbling into class. Unbelievable, she mutters. The professor coldly says, unbelievable, mediocre. Then he smacks her in the face with his sword, sending her flying. Ian had literally smacked her across the room, even landing a blow on her backside. The whole scene shocked everyone. This boy should be in prison, someone muttered. It wasn't debris, this was Ian's own body moving, but controlled by something else. All the students were terrified. That wasn't a normal spar, she was supposed to be the top student, yet Ian destroyed her. He even lectured her, saying she should start suspecting every opening he gave her, since she clearly didn't know how to deal with traps. Now back in the present, Ian wonders why he had to beat that particular girl, someone from his own class. If it had been someone else, at least it wouldn't be so awkward. But now he's standing face to face with the beautiful girl who's about to destroy him. Celine quietly suggests that maybe it's better if he just surrenders, since otherwise he's going to get beaten for nothing. The other students comment on how impressive Sakria's persistence is. After all, she took a brutal beating, spent a week in the hospital and still came back. Man, if it were me, I'd never step foot in this school again. One of them said, obviously your Dina's mental state isn't in the best place. The professor tells everyone to shut up and prepare, since this duel will replace several lessons and count for a big grade. Ian, however, is frustrated. That damn spirit could have resolved this before disappearing. How am I supposed to deal with this now? He thinks, she's the academy's top student. Even though she was humiliated last time, her grades won't be affected. But if he loses here, he risks being expelled. Ian's plan is simple. He'll endure a beating for 10 minutes until she's satisfied, but within seconds she punches him in the stomach so hard that he flies like a cannonball across the room. Lying on the ground, he realizes that even if he gives up, she won't hold back. He stands up and declares, now it's my turn. Sakria tells him to end it quickly, and as he charges with glowing eyes, something feels strange. His body is unusually light. What happened during that week he can't remember. Sakria just laughs, disappears and disarms him, stabbing him in the ribs. Ian collapses, vomiting blood while she mocks him. What happened to all those traps you showed me last week? Back then you beat me without even trying, but now you're like this. Ian curses and tells her to shut up. He's sick of everyone talking about last week, but she isn't backing down either, blaming him for her humiliation. She leaps forward again. As she flies through the air toward him, Ian suddenly notices his vision and reflexes sharpening, his kinetic awareness improving in ways he doesn't understand. He thinks maybe he has a chance, until Sakria slams him against the wall with a spinning attack. He thought she would come from the side, but she dove from above. She's teleporting like the daughter of Goku, slamming him into the ground again and again. But even while being beaten, Ian wonders why she makes so many unnecessary movements. She sneers, don't rush in thinking you see an opening. Everything can be a trap, isn't that what you told me last week? Now it's time for you to be the one getting beaten. She locks him into a brutal hold, and the beating continues. When are you going to start taking this seriously? She asks coldly. Ian realizes something. Even though he feels stronger, Sakria is fighting with deadly seriousness. He tries a sword strike, but she ducks, counters, and launches another devastating combo. This time though, he manages to block a few strikes and hold his ground. Ian is certain that if he asks to surrender now, she won't say anything, but instead she just smiles and says he's finally starting to take this seriously. It's time for him to show that attack again. Yum observes the fight. Ian thinks he found an opening, but no, he was wrong. Someone shouts that he has 5 seconds to get up. The professor starts counting down while Ian is still dazed on the ground, staring at ants, realizing that he seems to have returned to being just a normal guy. Unfortunately, Yurdina misunderstands his intentions. She tells him to stop taking a beating for nothing. She knows he doesn't really want to fight, and he might think she'll just let this go. But she makes it clear as long as he refuses to fight her seriously, she will keep challenging him over and over until he feels just as humiliated as she did. Ian is starting to lose his patience. He's being punished for something he doesn't even remember doing. He can't believe this girl wants to make him her sworn enemy over something like this. The professor then asks if William Ian surrenders, but now the boy is motivated and answers no. Yordina thanks him, agreeing that they can't just end things like this. Ian, now enraged, vows that he'll tear apart her pride. In a flash, she uses her Goku teleport again, growing fiercer, swinging her sword straight for his head, but this time Ian steps forward, grabs her blade and smirks. Got you. The next chapter opens with him declaring that he can't run anymore. He has to wipe that smug smile off her face. By now, he's getting used to her movements. What seemed impossible before is now manageable. He's at least able to dodge, and he even invites her to come at him again. When she leaps in for a vertical slash, Ian already knows what she's about to do. He steps forward, grabs the hilt of her sword, stopping her strike mid-air, and leans close. Caught you, he says. He tosses her weapon aside. She scrambles after it, but this time Ian seizes the moment. Poor Yordina freezes in shock. Her body trembles, expecting a crushing blow, but Ian stops. He asks himself if this is really the right thing to do. Beating her senseless won't solve anything. It would only make the situation repeat itself. It's not about winning or losing, but about understanding the other person. So instead of striking, he just flicks her forehead. Pew! The crowd is stunned. Surely now she's going to fall for him, right? He gives her a cheeky grin. Yordina, humiliated, demands to know what he's doing and whether he's mocking her. But Ian asks her why she tries so hard to beat him. She replies that she can't afford to lose again or everyone will laugh at her. Ian counters, "Why does it matter what others think of you? No matter what they say, the effort you've put into improving your swordsmanship doesn't just disappear," saying that, out of nowhere, the boy has turned into a philosopher. Yordina, however, is shaken. She admits that people will mock her anyway, and she feels worthless. Ian tells her again that her effort can't be erased by their words. He's lost more times than anyone else at the academy, so he knows firsthand how selfish and cruel people can be. But in the end, none of that ever changed his swordsmanship. His words hit her hard. Yordina, overwhelmed, apologizes and thanks him, admitting that she learned a lot from their fight. From the sidelines, the other students are confused. Wait, does that mean Ian actually won? The tanned blonde boy can't believe it. Ian just defeated the Academy's strongest second-year student twice in a row. The professor officially announces his victory. Ian walks off confidently, leaving Yordina behind. But now the whole school is buzzing. Everywhere he goes, people are whispering. Everyone is convinced he's stronger than Yordina. But Ian knows the truth. It isn't that simple. His mana and aura detection may have improved, but if Yordina had fought seriously with her full aura, he wouldn't have stood a chance. Still, he can't stop wondering what happened during that missing week of possession. Someone taps his shoulder. He turns. It's Celine. She says they spoke with the saint at the cathedral, and the saint assured them Ian is fine, so he doesn't need to worry. And besides, who cares about the rumors? They're not even that bad. Before he was just seen as useless trash with no future. Now he's just considered a psychopath. That's an improvement, isn't it? Celine even blushes, adding that she overheard a girl saying he's not that bad looking. Ian immediately wants to know who said it, but Celine stomps her foot and tells him to stop worrying about that. What he really needs to focus on now is the fact that as a commoner in this academy, the nobles aren't going to leave him alone. And at that moment, Leto asks if it's true that since that day Yordina hasn't stopped. Leto asks if it's true that Yordina has been following Ian. Ian, embarrassed, says, "Just look to the right." The two turn their heads and there she is, hiding behind a tree, blushing like crazy. Oh boy. To make things worse, Celine is already annoyed about it. "Man, your life is hard. Trade with me," the narrator jokes. Leto wants to know how long this has been happening. Ian admits it hasn't even been 5 days since their duel, but every time he tries to talk to her, she vanishes without a word. Meanwhile, Yordina is off to the side, nervously asking herself what she should do. She wants to talk to him, but just then Ian calls her out, saying he already noticed her presence. "Do you have something to say to me?" Flustered, She removes her disguise and demands to know how he saw through it. Embarrassed, she apologizes and asks if he would help her train. She says she wants to become stronger. Our protagonist is baffled. What could he possibly teach the top student of the second year? Aside from giving her psychological advice, he has nothing to offer someone at her level. On top of that, he's trying to reduce the rumors about himself, not create more. That's why he politely refuses. She insists that he must have something to teach her, but he still refuses and leaves. After all, he only beat her by chance. But then she begs him at least help her until the hunting festival. At that moment, Ian remembers the letters mentioning this festival. They warned about multiple accidents, including a girl named Emma from the alchemy department who went out to gather herbs and was killed by mysterious monsters. Yurdina stands there, awkward and shy, like an otaku at a convention, her fingers pressed together as she mumbles, but Ian is too stubborn. He says he's too busy to waste time with her and tells her to go ask the professor instead. Then he dashes past his friends pretending he has something important to do. He still doesn't fully believe the letters, but the fact that his friends' names were written in them has him worried. Meanwhile, in the alchemy workshop, Emma is tinkering with a test tube. Ian wonders if she has any idea about what's coming. The third letter had said, "You must get used to living in Arendt, a desert land where the sun is scorching and the sea shines bright. There is a saying, if you look through the eyes of the fairy you will find hidden treasures." Writing letters has become part of my daily life now. Apparently, at the end of each chapter there are little letters like this that help explain the story. The scene shifts. Under the blazing sun we see the beautiful Sakria Yurdina practicing sword swings //. The professor watches and eventually says that's enough for today. If she keeps training with her aura, she'll be ready for the hunting festival. She thanks him, explaining that Ian had suggested she talk with the professor. But Sakria, being her arrogant self, comments that she realized the professor has nothing to teach her. The man just sighs, thinking, this girl has zero social skills, and waves goodbye. Her full name is Sakria Yurdena. I kept calling her Urdena before, but it seems Sakria is her proper name. The professor stops her, however, and gives her some final advice. For the hunting festival, the most important thing is adapting to the terrain and to the monsters in the area. Most of the higher class students have already done this. At the entrance of the forest, things seem easy, but deep inside, dangerous creatures await. Sakria thanks him and says she'll try to go deeper next time, but he warns her to be careful. Most monsters can be handled by students, but there are some that could very well kill her. The story then shifts to a myth. In the beginning, the god of light, Ars, and the god of darkness, Melos, created the world. The god of light created the flow of time, and from that moment, the difference between past and future existed. The divine law was that if this order was ever broken, the world itself would suffer. That's why any being capable of disrupting time would become an enemy of the gods. The first being who could do this was known as Delphirin. This is probably the same story the red-haired girl told Ian earlier, but Ian admits he doesn't understand a word of it. She tells him not to bother her. She barely slept last night and doesn't feel like explaining. Besides, he disappeared for a month without speaking to her, and now he shows up out of nowhere asking for help without even asking how she's been. Ian tries to defend himself, saying they're friends, but she retorts, what kind of friend only shows up when he needs something? He insists again, begging her to simplify the story a little. Annoyed, she agrees and says she'll explain it to him as if he were mentally challenged. To go against time itself, you must be unimaginably strong, and in this world there is only one being powerful enough to do so, that is Delphirin, servant of the god of darkness. Ian begins to wonder, could the mysterious letters be coming from that being? The girl tells him to stop overthinking and stick to common sense because nothing he's saying makes sense. But if he really had to guess who could send messages from the future, then yes, it would have to be Delphirin. After all, there is no other mythical being capable of it. In other words, this whole business about letters from the future is nonsense, and he'd better start locking his room properly at night, or it will never stop. Ian thinks she's mocking him, but he doesn't really blame her. After all, he just showed up out of nowhere claiming he's been getting letters from the future. Then she hands him 2 potions she's been working on recently. They're supposed to reduce a person's presence. He asks if that means he'll turn invisible. She replies, "Of course not," but before she can explain, the boy gulps one down. Immediately he complains that it tastes awful, while she demands to know why he wasted something so valuable. The poor guy takes a scolding but insists he just wanted to test whether it really worked. At first it doesn't seem like it. She sighs, closes her eyes, and says that since he already drank it, they might as well test the results. She'll try to sense his presence. That's when Ian notices something strange. Even he feels like he's fading. It's as if his presence is gone. If he stayed quiet and hidden, maybe no one would even notice him. He tries to intensify the test by stepping closer, but suddenly, she grabs him by the collar. Surprised, he asks how she managed to catch him. She explains that while his presence had disappeared, she could still smell his body. Ian finds that explanation a bit awkward, thanks her for everything, and says he'll be leaving. But before going, he warns her, "Don't go to the hunting festival. You'll die if you do. If you decide to go, at least call me first." She seems touched by his concern, smiling faintly. That night, as the sun sets, another letter arrives. Whoever is sending them seems more motivated than ever. Ian collapses onto his bed, still unsure whether these letters are truly from the future. At least for now, she's safe. He gave her a warning. Then Letta shows up. Ian immediately stands, scolding him for leaving letters around as a joke. He says that maybe Letta fooled him once, but if he tries that again, he'll regret it. Letta, confused, asks what he's talking about. Ian presses on, saying he knows Letta was behind it because he mentioned Ama. But Letta stares blankly. He hasn't heard from Ama in a long time. He asks nervously if she's doing okay. Ian assures him she's fine, though in reality she isn't. At that very moment, Ama lies with a gaping wound in her chest. In the next letter, the sender complains that they've been writing to him almost every day, but he only bothers to reply once a week. The following chapter shows Ama badly injured. Ian had warned her not to enter the forest, but she ignored him. Now she's paying the price. A priestess tends to her wounds, explaining that the girl was lucky. Normally monsters don't appear near this area, but when they did, she had the presence of mind to drink a potion that made her seem dead. Without it, she wouldn't have survived at all. Ian begs the priestess to save her, but miracles aren't free. The priestess explains that she would need a valuable offering to create one. Ian points out that Ama, being the daughter of a humble herbalist, doesn't own anything rare or expensive. The priestess clarifies, it doesn't need to be monetary value, just something extremely difficult to obtain. Still, she warns them to prepare for the worst. She tells them they may leave, but Ian refuses. He insists on staying because he was the last person to see Ama alive. The priestess advises him not to blame himself and even casts a spell to soothe his mind, but it seems to have no effect. Meanwhile, Letta mutters angrily about how a monster could appear so suddenly near the forest entrance. Ian tries to respond, but just then, Ama's father bursts in, sobbing and demanding to know what happened to his daughter. Sadly, because of the ritual, he isn't allowed to see her body. Ian can't help but think the ritual feels fake anyway. Both he and Leda are poor commoners who entered the academy on scholarships. They have nothing rare to offer for such ceremonies. Instead, Ian gives Ama's father the potion she had once entrusted to him, telling him that he should carry her legacy, but the man pushes it back, gripping Ian's shoulder, and says no, he wants Ian to keep it, to carry Ama's memory himself. That hits Ian hard. He wonders why he didn't take the letter more seriously. To be fair, he did warn her not to enter the forest, but she went anyway. Still, he feels his warning was too vague. He should have been firmer, clearer. Whether the letters are truly from the future or not, he can't ignore them anymore. He must find this mysterious Sakria, the one writing the letters, and prevent any dangerous events from happening. By the time the burial ends, Letta asks casually who this Sakria is, and whether Tor has managed to get a girlfriend yet. Ian, however, shoves him aside, his face dark with anger. Stay away. He doesn't have a girlfriend, it's just that this person apparently is the one behind the letters. His friend, however, is all curious and playful, wanting to know which girl is making him so anxious. The protagonist immediately lands a punch on his face, telling him to shut up. Then Leto comments that Sepia is the name of a flower, so maybe it's just a nickname, not a real name. That flower, Sepia, is from the north, and the Northern Territory belongs to the Yordina family. Leto reaches the same conclusion. The only person who comes to mind is that strange girl hiding behind the tree. Both of them come to the same conclusion, and then the strange girl approaches, offering a bag of money saying it's compensation for the help he gave her. He's completely confused. Not only does he not remember helping her, but the amount of money is absurd. She's offering it because she thinks he refused to teach her since she had asked for free. He then asks why she's so desperate to learn from him. The humble girl replies that it's because she has nothing left to learn from anyone else. The protagonist thinks that the lecture he gave her before was useless. He tells her that she already seems to be doing well and should just continue on that path. But she answers that she cannot afford to lose her chance at this year's hunting festival. At that moment, he remembers that the letter also mentioned that Sarah would participate in the festival, so he calls her and says that from today on they will start training together. He wants to find out if the Sakria from the letter is actually Sarah Yurdina. Several days pass since they began training together. First, he discovers that she has zero social skills, so bad that she even has the nickname Awkward Yordina. Second, he learns that high-ranking nobles train all day long non-stop using healing potions to recover. During one of their runs she injured her foot, but it was fine. She was just going to drink a potion and continue. William tells her to take it easy. The potion might cure the pain, but it won't remove joint fatigue or muscle strain. He then asks why she keeps saying the hunt is her last chance. What exactly is causing so much anxiety? She explains that there is someone from the 4th year whom she must defeat, but if that person graduates, her chance is gone. He tells her it doesn't make sense. Even after graduation she could still challenge her, but Sakria replies, "The longer it takes, the smaller my chances become. Besides, once she graduates, I can't officially challenge the future head of the family." That's right, her sister is even more terrifying, Delphina Yurdina, her half-sister, already guaranteed by their parents to inherit the family leadership. Since Sakria comes from a secondary bloodline, she doesn't even have the right to challenge Delphina. The academy is the only place where she still has a chance. Letter number 5 talks about how sad the bride feels that she cannot help him in this moment of suffering. In the following chapter, Sakria is listening to the sound of worms while Delphina praises her hard work. But it's a pity, she says, because Sakria was simply born without enough talent and will never be able to defeat her. Poor Sakria knows that no one in her family is on her side. All she ever wanted was someone who believed in her. Now, hearing our protagonist say she should be able to move forward again, she wonders if she should ask him for support. And so the day of the hunting festival finally arrives. It's simple. They are thrown into the forest and they must hunt beasts. Whoever kills the strongest beast wins. Nothing dangerous, right? Except for the fact that a student literally just died in that same forest. According to the letters, the protagonist knows that Sakria will participate, and Sepia will approach him. The problem is, he still has no idea who Sepia actually is, which leaves him very confused. At that moment, Celine calls him saying they should go together. He, all awkward, asks why the rush. She tells him to stop being an idiot. Of course they would go together. There's no way Sakria would go with him, especially since he beat her up. The protagonist explains that it was Sakria herself who offered, but Celine gets angry, demanding to know why he's always siding with her. Out of nowhere he grabs her head, and she, confused, asks what he's doing. Suddenly things take a romantic turn. He leans closer, sniffing her. "Did you change your perfume, woman?" "I didn't. That's my new facial cleanser." The guy really is a master of changing the subject. Celine, however, seems worried about the test. Ian tells her not to worry, he'll just explore the forest a little. The same forest where the last girl entered and left with a hole in her chest. And yet no one seems to remember her anymore. Ian knows what he's saying, but the letter already made it clear there will be a magical beast attack, which means obviously people are going to die. Boy, have you ever thought of warning the authorities? Do you really think you're the only protagonist here who's going to take down everyone? Well, in his case he actually is, but it wasn't going to be that simple. The professor gathered everyone and explained how the points would be awarded. As they probably knew, the forest was full of magical beasts. Their objective was to hunt them down, but they needed to be careful. The beasts had been spotted close to the edge, which meant some from the deeper areas might have wandered out as well. To make his point, the professor drew his sword and struck a tree, telling them they needed to get used to fighting in places where threats could come from anywhere. William admitted that was actually a good piece of advice, since animals were much better adapted to the forest than humans. Then the professor released his aura, saying that for those who could materialize it, things were different. Even if their sword was blocked, the aura would cut through like butter. To demonstrate, he sliced clean through several trees. The students just stared. What kind of environmental criminal was this guy? 5-6 trees gone for no reason. Afterward, he warned them again. This was no game. In this test, they could die. The students were ordered to form pairs, but also reminded not to venture too deep into the forest because it was dangerous. Ian, however, thought the whole plan was reckless. If magical beasts had really appeared, the best thing would be to alert the professors immediately. Of course, as soon as the pairings were announced, Celine rushed over and asked if they'd be going together. Poor girl. She was ignored. Ian grabbed Sakria instead and said they would pair up. What kind of protagonist rejects girls so casually and still comes off like a jerk? Sometime later, they reached the edge of the area the professor had marked as the limit. Strangely, they hadn't seen a single beast. Sakria mentioned she couldn't sense anything either, and Ian trusted her judgment. Still, he suggested they take a break. He leaned against a tree and told her to stay sharp. Meanwhile, she was fidgeting awkwardly, rubbing her thighs. Seriously, is there a shortage of men in this world or something? Then she asked why he had chosen her as his partner. He reminded her they had trained together, so of course it made sense. But her answer was different. She said it was because they were friends. Ian laughed. What kind of logic is that? She went on, insisting that friendship had to be backed by something. If he wanted, she could repay him with gold or something else once they got back to the dorm. Ian sighed and told her to relax. Friendship wasn't about transactions. Friends helped each other. No strings attached. After a pause, Sakria asked if she could be blunt. She wanted to know if he was venturing so deep into the forest because of that other girl, the one who had been attacked. Ian didn't answer. He clenched his fists, thinking of his friend. His silence only left Sakria more confused. Finally, he said he was there to kill beasts, and asked her what she would do if he was attacked. Naturally, she replied that she would have to kill the monster. He nodded. That was exactly how he felt too. Sakria thought about it and realized maybe that was what friendship really meant. Just then Ian froze. He told her to focus, because something was wrong. At first she couldn't sense anything, but then suddenly she did. Dozens of magical beasts surrounded them. With numbers like that, every student in the forest was in danger. Meanwhile, letter number 6 had arrived earlier, talking about the strategic importance of the Empire's port and how the war was far from over. These letters from the future made Ian feel more like the protagonist of a story than ever. Back in the forest, Sakria asked if they should fight. Ian shook his head. No way, there were too many of them. They had to run. On his signal, the two bolted. After only 2 minutes, Ian was already gasping for breath. Worse, he could feel something massive chasing them, and at this rate, they weren't going to survive. He needed to reach the professor, but then the prodigy of the academy managed to twist her ankle again. Same cursed injury as before. Of course, she immediately launched into the classic dramatic plea, telling him to abandon her and save himself. Ian, however, spotted glowing eyes approaching through the trees. The monster was already upon them. Even then, Sakria insisted that it was her fault if he died. But Ian told her not to worry, he would handle it. And then unexpectedly, the beast vanished into the shadows. Ian realized it wasn't fleeing from him, it was hiding. It must have sensed a greater predator nearby. Still, he wasn't going to waste the chance. He pulled out a potion, swallowed it, and felt his presence fade. With this, the monsters wouldn't notice him. He covered himself in mud to mask his scent, smeared it all over his body and climbed onto a tree branch like a monkey waiting. He wanted those beasts to come closer. The first one soon appeared. From its sharp teeth and the aura surrounding it, he could tell it was a demonic creature. The monster looked confused, since the scent it had been following suddenly disappeared. That was the perfect moment to drive his sword into its skull. At first he thought his aura wasn't strong enough to pierce through, but it was. The blade sank deep. Once dead, the beast collapsed to the ground. But this wasn't the time to panic. He needed to stay calm and keep the danger away from Sakria. Suddenly, he sensed another presence. Another wolf was approaching, but this time it wasn't alone. At least 5 of them were nearby. He hesitated for a second, then struck. He managed to kill one, but another bit his hand, a wound that should have left him crippled. Yet because he was the protagonist, he retaliated immediately, hacking the beast apart with his axe. This brought him back to the scene at the beginning of the story. He realized the axe was indeed useful. His reflexes were sharper than ever, and he was surprised by how quickly he could react. Covered in blood and determination, he felt like he could take them all on. Meanwhile, Celine threw her sword to the ground, stepped on it, and muttered angrily, thinking about how that damned Ian was with another woman in the forest. Sakria appeared, calling for the professor. He rushed over asking what happened, and she told him there were beasts in the forest. Worse, Ian had stayed behind to protect her after she was injured. The professor understood immediately and ran off in Ian's direction. When Sakria was first introduced, she was said to be the top student of the 2nd year. Now here she was, fainting from a sprained ankle. Meanwhile, the so-called Wolf Master approached, sniffing the air, only to fall straight into Ian's trap. With a sudden strike, Ian drove his weapon deep into the beast. But more wolves arrived. He shouted for them to come at him. They darted around like shadows, attacking from both sides. Yet their movements were simple, and Ian cut them down one by one, perfectly timing his strikes. Fueled by the dream he once had, he refused to stop. He swore he would kill every last one of them. Soon the ground was soaked in blood, his axe dripping red. But even after the slaughter, he could sense another presence. This one didn't approach. It seemed to be waiting, maybe luring him into a trap. The creature was intelligent, unlike the others. Ian considered leaving. There was no reason to fight. Then he caught a scent, not just any scent, one he could never forget. It was the same smell from the alchemy room, the same as the potion she had once given him. His expression hardened. This was the very beast that had attacked Emma. A scrap of her clothing hung from its mouth. Confirming it, Ian glared and swore he would kill it here and now. But the wolf spat the fabric onto his sword as if mocking him. Ian realized the creature was laughing at him. Unlike the other beasts, this one was of a much higher rank. Before he could think further, the wolf dashed forward like a bullet, striking him so hard he crashed into a tree. Still, he got back up quickly. The attack was so fast he hadn't even had a chance to react. The wolf came again. This time, Ian infused his sword with mana, throwing it straight into the beast's mouth. Forced to dodge, the wolf exposed itself, and Ian swung his axe, cutting across its face. But even with all his strength and mana, it barely scratched the creature's fur. The wolf lunged again, and Ian barely managed to block with his axe. The beast leapt back, flipping in the air with inhuman agility. Ian muttered that he should join the circus. Then he noticed some of the wolf's teeth had cracked from biting his sword. Still, Ian wasn't unscathed either. As he caught his breath, the beast suddenly shifted its attack, feinting one way then striking from another angle. A trick straight out of Ronaldinho's playbook. If Ian was confused, how much worse was it for him in the middle of the fight? The wolf seemed to toy with him, pushing him to the limit. Then, as if realizing the danger of dragging this out, the wolf grew serious. Out of nowhere, it unleashed a powerful strike, slamming Ian into the wall of a cliff. Its claws pierced into his chest, about to finish him off, but the scene cut abruptly. When the dust settled, it was revealed that Ian had played dead. As the wolf leaned closer, grinning with malicious delight, the same expression it had when attacking Emma, Ian's eyes snapped open. As expected, the monster came for an attack to the stomach, but when it got close, Ian suddenly stood up and stabbed it in the neck. In the end, beasts were nothing but idiots, and this one let its guard down the moment he pretended to be dead. He said the wolf was stupid for trying to finish him off in the same way. Then he released a mana slash that echoed throughout the forest, and with that, the corpse fell to the ground. Ian declared that the bastard died because it kept playing around, thinking he was weaker. Now, that wolf would forever be remembered as the one that died for attacking Ima. Meanwhile, the professor was running desperately. He was rushing forward when he saw an explosion in front of him, and wondered if Ian had died. Standing before a pile of corpses, he was confused. In theory, the only person supposed to be in that place was Ian, and the beasts. When Celine and the rest of the students arrived, he told them that Ian wasn't there. They would have to keep advancing deeper into the forest. At that moment, someone called out to Celine from the side. It was him. Ian was sitting next to the wolf's body, calmly radiating aura. He teased them, saying they took their time to arrive. Overcome with emotion, he called for Professor Derek, the very man who had done absolutely nothing to help. With that, Ian collapsed and woke up later in the Temple of the Saint. From what he learned, it would take some time before he could leave that place, and everyone said he was lucky to have survived. That wolf, though strong, was still in its early years of life, which meant it could have grown much stronger. At that moment, Leto scolded him, saying he was a complete idiot who had lost a few screws, nearly dying just to act cool for the girls. It made no sense, especially since when girls did show interest in him, he pretended to be too much of a man to be with a woman. Leto then pointed out that Ian probably survived only because of the potion, and Ian agreed. Immediately, Leto called him an idiot again. He could have given the potion to Yurdina, left her up in the tree, and gone to call the professor for help to deal with the wolves. Ian admitted it sounded like a much smarter plan, though it was too late now. Leto muttered that he wanted to kill Ian himself, but also mentioned that Yurdina seemed to have a problem. She had been circling the temple 12 times a day like a weirdo. Ian thought to himself that he really had attracted a strange girl, and before he could process it, Celine suddenly threw herself into his arms. "Calm down, Celine," he thought. "I thought you were a little more controlled." Leto, meanwhile, noticed that Celine didn't even seem to acknowledge him at all. Ian, on the other hand, thought Yurdina was already strange enough, but now this one was clinging to him too. Leto said it was time to claim the boy's reward. Apparently Ian had earned 70 gold coins, but instead of celebrating, he was sulking because the wolf had bitten his hand. Still, Celine grabbed his arm and said they would be going out to eat tonight. She knew a restaurant that specialized in cooking magical beasts, and that's where they would go. Nobody seemed to comment on how clingy she was being. Ian complained, saying he had just woken up from his injuries and she was already bothering him, but she held him tightly and cried, saying she thought he was going to die. Ian found himself strangely drawn to her, even noting how good she smelled. Still, she kept sobbing, saying he should have abandoned Yurdina and left her to die. He calmly replied that he couldn't just abandon someone in danger like that. And just like that, another girl fell for him. She confessed that he was the most important person in the world to her and that nothing else mattered. Ian couldn't help but feel confused. He wondered if almost dying had triggered these feelings in her. She cupped his face in her hands, telling him to stay still. From the day he had that 7-day dream, his life had completely changed. At that moment, Leto interrupted them, and the two quickly pulled away. Ian felt a bit sorry for his friend, who awkwardly said he hadn't wanted to disturb his date with Junior, his way of referring to Celine, whom he considered like a little sister. Poor guy. Still, he warned Ian that he needed to be careful. He couldn't just focus on Yurdina and neglect Celine, isolating her like that. The world of women was complicated, and indeed, trouble was on the horizon. Ian, narrating from the future, admitted that looking back, Leto's words were important, because the relationship between the two girls would eventually take a turn for the worse. In the following chapter, Yurdina walked through the academy while everyone whispered and called her the rude one. The only reason she wasn't dead last in the rankings was because she had been paired with someone talented during the last test. Otherwise, she would have failed miserably. Celine reflected on all of this, realizing that Ian had indeed killed all those magical beasts while she had only run away. She hadn't needed to fight since it was her mistake. The responsibility should have been hers too. But Ian had stepped up like a knight, telling her not to say such things, reminding her that they were friends. Oh, damn, she thought. This turned into some kind of messy romance, didn't it? She remembered all too well how the professor scolded Ian, who was nearly killed because of her mistake. She now asked herself why Ian had risked his life for her. In the past, she wouldn't have been able to answer. But now she could. Certainly. At that moment, her thoughts were interrupted by him calling out to her. As she turned, she realized that for the first time she felt comfortable being close to someone. He didn't even need to say anything, just his gaze was enough. What was happening? It suddenly felt like this was turning into a romance story. But let's speed through this part and get back to the important things. She arrived at the hospital, opened the door and looked inside. He was lying on the bed. He reached out his hand to her and she, blushing and shy, approached. He was reading a small red book. She showed him a bag of money and he noticed she was worried. She became excited to see that he was getting better. He told her not to worry and she smiled again. She had brought a pouch of gold coins to thank him for saving her. However, he seemed reluctant to accept it, saying it wasn't necessary because they were friends. Yet just by holding her hand she was already completely flustered. At that moment Celine appeared, greeting him with a cheerful good morning. But of course she saw her rival and deliberately bumped into her shoulder. I'd even say, careful Celine, you might get beaten up by Sakria, because she's ranked number 2. But despite that, Celine managed to knock her down with a shoulder bump, making her fall to the floor like a complete fool. Sakria got up awkwardly, humiliated, and said she was leaving. Celine coldly told her to get lost. That girl was fierce. Ian tried to complain, but Celine cut him off and told him to focus instead on deciding what they would eat today. He remembered Let's words, telling him not to ignore Celine, while Sakria, standing outside, looked completely dejected. People were starting to notice. Some students watching from the corner whispered that she had become more annoying than before. They already disliked her when she was at the top, and favored by the professor, and now they hated her even more because she was a disgrace to the nobility. One of them asked Tian if he agreed. Tian, the blonde with tanned skin, replied that they should be careful. One wrong move and they could be in serious danger. Suddenly, someone appeared and said they could share some information about Sirio Urdina if they were interested. Tian stood up and demanded she speak quickly since he was curious. The girl with green hair pulled down her hood and told them not to worry. No one from the Urdina family would move against them because Sirio wasn't from the main bloodline. Meanwhile, Ian arrived at poor Emma's hospital room. She asked what Ian was doing there since he had already been discharged from the hospital. What had happened? He ignored her questions and instead asked about Emma's condition. The saint explained that with continuous treatment, Emma could be kept alive, but it didn't mean she would fully recover. Ian asked if her previous offer to exchange something valuable for treatment was still valid. He wanted to know what he could offer. She replied that any object of high divine power or a powerful magical artifact would suffice. Usually remains of magical beasts were used, but obviously Emma's father had never had the chance to obtain anything like that. Ian then asked if offering a high-ranked magical beast would be enough. From what he knew, such a beast was worth about 70 gold coins. Unfortunately, the saint said that still wouldn't be sufficient. However, if it were an adult magical beast, then maybe it would work. Ian thanked her for the explanation and excused himself. She replied that she would continue praying for Emma's recovery. As Ian left, he thought about a certain monster mentioned in the letter. Perhaps that could make a good offering, but then he remembered how much trouble he had already faced just dealing with that wolf, which had been his limit. And by the way, someone in the comments asked why the saint was dressed so provocatively. Was that even legal? They were half joking that she should be arrested. The next chapter began with Ian entering a room, calling for the professor. The professor remarked that Ian seemed to be feeling well, then asked what he wanted. Ian asked whether the professor could handle a magical beast stronger than that wolf. The professor answered that it was difficult to say, it depended on the strength of the monster. However, such beasts were very rare. Ian insisted, saying that wasn't what it looked like given how many creatures had been appearing lately. The professor explained that the chances of a stronger beast appearing in the southern forest were very low. Normally, beasts of that level only appeared in areas with extremely high concentrations of energy, usually far from human settlements. On top of that, the annual hunting examination kept the monster population even lower. Ian pushed further, asking what if a particularly strong one had survived and showed up. The professor still insisted it was highly unlikely, explaining that the more powerful beasts had an even stronger presence and would have already been noticed. Ian couldn't bring himself to believe it. He was still worried that a powerful monster might appear because of the letters, but the professor repeated firmly that the hunting competition was when everyone targeted strong beasts. If there really were one lurking nearby, it would certainly have been found by now. Wow! Out of nowhere, our boy twisted the professor's words and said he didn't care if the students died. Poor guy was caught off guard. The professor immediately clarified that this wasn't what he meant. Besides, everyone participating in the event was there to overcome challenges. Ian realized that in the end, no one would take action unless something happened. Once again, he had no choice but to rely on himself. Honestly, I had criticized him before, but now he truly asked the professor for help and the guy really didn't do anything. Elsewhere in the academy, Sakria still hadn't eaten lunch, and those guys were bothering her again. She couldn't understand why they brought it up again if they had already stopped. Tien commented that she must be the Urdina girl who grew up without a mother. Suddenly she turned and approached while the guy wanted to know if she had something to say. Sakria calmed down and thought she didn't know where they had heard that, but she wouldn't waste her energy. She had already been told to continue ignoring people just like she always had. Then one of them kicked her arm, saying she was truly the brilliant Urdina. Her food fell to the floor along with her bag, while some bystander played the author's audio stating she was the top of the second year. Apparently the second-year students weren't that impressive. Ian wandered through the academy, thinking that at last he wouldn't have to eat hospital food anymore. At that moment he saw some students commenting about someone trembling in the academy. It seemed to be related to the Dina family. One of the students said that Sarah was a disgrace to her family. Nobody cared about her, and her mother had been of low status. She shouldn't have been involved in any of this. Another red-haired student said they didn't need to worry. Only one person in the academy would defend her. Pertatum, standing nearby, asked if it wasn't Ian Percus. The guy turned, confirming it was him. He even came face to face with their queen, demanding he repeat what he had said. Ian, flustered, replied that they were just talking about the wonderful weather today, but at that same moment his friends were dragged off to a chat and seemed to take a beating. Ian slammed the door, thinking that those academy students had no respect left. Later, Leto called Ian over and asked him to check an article. Proton was shocked when he realized it was about him. At just 23 years old, Ian was terrified of a woman, realizing that after killing the magical beasts in the forest, including a high-rank one, everyone was now saying he was on the same level as the elite students. Meanwhile, the young lady Sakria Urdina, age 22, the second-year student who had once been top of her department, was struggling and had fled during the forest incident, abandoning Ian. Confused, Ian asked who wrote the article. Apparently she had gone to call the professor because her foot was broken. Ian couldn't understand why he was receiving so much praise. Leto told him to enjoy his fame while it lasted. Meanwhile, the arrogant Sakria Urdina fled, and Ian killed all the creatures that deserved recognition. However, he wasn't pleased and wanted to know who wrote the article. Leto said it seemed to be a certain Princess Ball and warned him not to even think about trying to change that. Ian was upset. That girl didn't care about poor people and was just cruel. Unfortunately, the story couldn't be changed. Leto asked why Ian wanted so badly to change it. Ian said he was sure it wouldn't sit well with Sakria. Many bad rumors about her had already spread. Outside, Ian commented that at least the guys might back off a little. Leto asked about their year, and Ian replied that they were all second-year students, one blonde and one brown-haired. He suspected they were part of Tien's group, who was in the third year. Ian had a bad feeling about all of this. For so many people to suddenly provoke Sakria like this, someone must have been coordinating it behind the scenes. One possibility was Tien, since he was from the north and could have used his connections to gather information about her. Ian understood and realized one thing: they would have to take down this group of guys. He moved forward, found her, called out to her, and she turned awkwardly. In theory, she had been the top of the second year. He asked what had happened. She remembered walking through the academy when someone mentioned that even her mother had been from a low-class background. Her friend agreed, adding that maybe the guy from Delphin had seen her mother on the streets. At that moment, Celine gave up. She had been holding back, but she was about to say something. As she approached, the guy asked what she was looking at. They had been talking about another girl, not her. By chance, the story seemed to be the same. She completely lost her mind and ran off in a panic. Oh my god. Apparently she activated an earth magic spell right beneath herself and tripped. At that moment she seemed immobilized, and the guy approached and poured wine on her head. Top 10 most useless women in stories. She ended up on the ground like trash, squashing ants. She said she held back. It was better than fighting and causing more problems. Yak knew who the culprit was, but she only said that the guy apologized and claimed it was an accident. Besides, the insults weren't directed at her name, so there wasn't much proof. Poor girl was crying, thinking that if she complained it would only cause more problems for her family. She was so foolish that I started to feel sorry for her. Could she be my type? I never imagined that. She wiped her tears and thanked him for listening. She said she was fine, but he replied that she could be fine, yet he wasn't okay with it. Oh boy, this was about to turn into a fight. Elsewhere in the academy, some guys were in a meeting, commenting as usual about the girl who carried herself like an idiot. Kian said it was hilarious. My friend responded that it must have been the most luxurious bath she'd ever taken in her life. At that moment, someone arrived with a dark expression to show that Ian was angry. They refused to speak to him, and Ian demanded they tell him where they had heard about Saria's life. One of them just laughed and asked why he would care. What the heck? Ian went over, punched the guy in the face, and sent him flying to the asphalt because the guy seemed to want his family destroyed, but Ian didn't hesitate, continuing to strike him and hurling him away. Another guy approached to throw a punch. Wow! Ian struck him so hard that the guy was launched into the air. Meanwhile, Ian calmly continued farming his aura, telling the others to prepare to explain themselves and apologize. He noticed that the other guys were holding their swords hesitantly. They weren't magic users. Apart from those two idiots, only T and a top third-year student was left. Defeating him wouldn't be easy, but Ian didn't worry about that yet. He decided to handle the two before tackling the last one. The guys ran at him excitedly, thinking this would be easy. Ian preemptively blocked an attack from one of them, glared and whipped his neck with a strike. At that moment he wondered, where are the others, and received a hit to the back of the neck. When he turned, two more jumped at him, and he successfully defended himself. He launched a counterattack, sending them flying. Ian really had a talent for making others take off. He struck one in the head, advanced, and finished the other with a blow to the face, using his axe. Now only the last guy remained, giving him a scornful glare. Ian wondered how he had improved so much. Perhaps he had received some miraculous potion from Yordina while training in the morning. Ian asked why the guy knew he trained with Sakria. He replied that he had been keeping a close eye on Ian recently, because Ian drew attention by defeating Sakria herself. Wow, what the heck? He was like Flash. Within seconds he was face to face with our boy. The problem was that his sword was much larger and he sent Ian flying. Ian had talent, but no magic yet. Ian only thought this guy was right, but he found a way to counter combat glow explosion. But it wasn't that easy. The guy summoned a circle in the middle of the arena and fired a lightning attack. This guy was more of a mage than a swordsman. He told Ian to give up, claiming he couldn't win just by standing and running. Ian told him to shut up, but the guy insisted that if he fought like a true man, he would remain silent. The men from the southern region accepted the consequences of a fight. Ian knew this guy was lying. He was mistreating Sakria simply because he couldn't beat her. Yet now he was making excuses. The guy advanced again. Ian anticipated the attack from above, dodged with a flash, and landed another strike to the side, exploding on the ground. He rose, exhausted but breathing, while the guy commented that he was curious, watching Ian's fight against Sakria. The opponent had seen him dodge theoretically impossible attacks. Ian knew this had happened when he had been possessed by a spirit. That spirit only possessed him once and never returned. The spirit could have been more powerful, taking control of the body and overwhelming all the girls in the school, then returning to chaos. Honestly, it would have been interesting, but the author would never do that. Looking at the ground, Rian remembered someone saying Ian seemed to have used a technique called spatial steps, a way to move more easily with soft footwork which matched what Ian did. Observing the terrain, he seemed to find a way to win that fight. Meanwhile, Takrian kept attacking, saying he was curious about how Ian had managed to do that. While dodging, Rian was waiting for the perfect moment. Lore, however, wasn't interested in figuring out what the problem was. Perhaps he had already lost the will to fight. If that was the case, he would just advance and finish things once and for all. But right then, his foot sank into the ground, and that was when Ian dodged to the side, avoiding the attack. Man, at the start he came swinging that axe, and I don't even know how no one's head has been chopped off yet. How is that possible? He was about to smash that axe right into his opponent's face, like some toy weapon. And of course, after you land a solid hit to the face, what do? You throw him to the ground, pin him down and squeeze his neck. Our dear Ian only runs away from girls so he can pin down the blonde boy. At least this time he told him to shut up before striking with the axe again. Once more though, the axe felt like a toy. Now it was clear, he was hitting with the blunt side instead of the sharp blade. He warned that he would crush his head until nothing remained. He completely destroyed the guy, at least physically. Someone from the background shouted, asking how Ian dared to do that, calling him Lupin, son of Countess Ranella. He warned Ian that he was finished, but Ian almost brought the axe down on his skull and immediately asked if the man wanted his head crushed too. Ian ordered him to start talking if he didn't want that to happen. The boy then admitted that he didn't know much, but it was the green-haired girl who had started everything. Everything they had discovered about Sakraya's mother and all the rumors had been spread because of her. Ian leaned in and told him coldly that nothing better could be expected from trash like him, but he had better remember if this ever happened again there would be no second chance. Leaving everyone broken, Ian was certain that, at the very least, they would stop harassing Sakria. The real problem now was figuring out who this girl spreading the rumors actually was. Meanwhile, Sakria was wandering through the academy, looking for Ian. She feared he might have gone to do something reckless because of the conversation they had earlier. Two other girls spotted her and mocked her, calling her the lost orphan, saying she should be called mommy just because she had no family. Sakria clenched her fists, tempted to strike them down with her sword, but decided it wasn't worth it. Still, the girls kept mocking her, saying she looked shaken. At that moment, Tian appeared and told them to shut up. His expression was sinister, but what he said was that if they kept causing trouble, they'd be beaten just like he was. And apparently it worked. The girls started apologizing. It was strange. He kept projecting this negative aura, saying there was no escape, that they would be beaten by Ian Percus just like everyone else had been. It seemed like he was trying to scheme something, perhaps framing Ian for assaulting nobles so he could be expelled. Or maybe not, since the girls actually bowed their heads towards Sakria, who answered coldly that he shouldn't be humiliating himself like this. He should just seek her out later instead. The artist definitely needed to change those background shots. It looked like Tian was whispering threats, but in reality he was just afraid of being humiliated again. If rumors of him being beaten spread, he'd rather apologize first than face shame. With that, he asked Sakria to tell Ian that they had apologized, and then he left. As soon as they were gone, the girls also apologized. It looked like they were possessed, as if exorcised. Their backs bent like their spines had snapped. Sakria, however, could only think that she couldn't keep relying so much on Ian. Next time she would have to handle things on her own, though honestly, that seemed doubtful. Then the scene cut to the saint, who honestly belonged in prison for the way she dressed. She was telling Ian to stop taking risks, saying she had heard he had beaten 8 people yesterday. If not for the Ramiras, that incident would have snowballed. Ian asked what she meant, and she explained that the Count was extremely displeased. Ian thought back to what that Lupin boy had said, and figured it must be connected to him. After all, the boy had kept his mouth shut, which was why Ian hadn't gotten into deeper trouble. The indecent saint, however, insisted she knew that boy's story, and that he was a decent person. She also said she owed Ian a favor because of last time. When he asked what she meant, she told him not to forget. At that moment, Ian realized that something had happened that week, something he hadn't even been aware of. Apparently her name was Saint Alyssa, a seraph he would never have had the chance to meet if not for the academy. What he didn't understand was what kind of huge favor she owed him to always be covering up for the messes he made. Just then Celine entered, clearly jealous. She opened the door, asked if he was all right, and immediately hugged him. She seemed upset that he had gone to such lengths because of Sakria, but Ian told her he would have done the same for her, especially since he had already promised. She replied that apparently he still remembered. Then Alyssa told him about at the time when her family was struggling, she was crying in the garden of flowers. When he saw his best friend crying that day in the garden, he swore to protect her. She hugged him tightly, and he told her not to worry, that she was like a little sister to him. That was the legendary reversed friend zone. Right then she stomped on his foot. He said he couldn't keep ruining the intimate moments they were about to have, pretending not to know what he had done wrong while she told him to shut up. At that moment he also said it was better for them to resolve the matter with Erdina quickly. People criticizing her wasn't uncommon, but now it was the entire academy and even some who didn't know her. He wondered who was behind this, but she said it was probably a group. Otherwise it wouldn't have spread so widely. Considering that the first and second years didn't have much contact, it could only have been the fourth years. He thought about telling his friend that now he knew it was a fourth-year girl with green hair. There couldn't be many like that. As he was leaving the hospital, he ran into Emma's father, who greeted him. Our boy told him not to be so formal, and asked how she was doing. Her father apologized, saying he was useless, that he couldn't help his daughter who was fighting for her life. Ian told him not to stress, that a miracle would happen. Top-tier motivational line. Emma's father thanked him for killing the beast, but Ian replied that it wasn't anything special. He had only done it to protect himself. They said goodbye and Ian left thinking that he had to do whatever it took to save Emma. On the way back he thought that since Leto was helping him and he had several connections, soon he would get the answers he needed. As always, he found Sakria training. He watched her movements, wondering how he had managed to defeat her. Not only had he defeated her, but practically everyone in the academy had beaten her before. She noticed his presence, blushed like an idiot as usual, and greeted him. When he asked what she was doing, she explained that she was practicing the golden lion fencing, her family's technique. It was a style that traced multiple slashes in the air, but at the moment she could only manage 3 since she wasn't very strong. He seemed interested in learning, but she said it wasn't necessary since he was already stronger than he should be. He didn't know how to respond, so he just said, "All right." Then she thanked him for what he had done the previous day and for resolving everything. But he told her not to worry, that he would always do anything for her because they were friends. I thought he would call her his little sister too, just like he did with the other one, to make her mad, but no, he didn't. Now she was fired up in more than one way. Still, she said she would solve her problems on her own. He told her that if she ever needed help, she just had to ask. With that she went back to training, while he kept observing her mana, realizing it was more stable. A person's mana represented their mental state, and before hers was a pale blue, but now it was becoming a stronger blue, showing her mindset was changing as well. Ian suggested it might be because everyone now knew about her mother, but she replied that it had been a long time ago, and she didn't care much anymore, since she was only 6 at the time. Her mother had been banished from the family, and all she begged for was that they take care of her daughter. However, the patriarch only ordered them to throw the woman out. Sakria explained that her mother had been disfigured. When her mother tried to reach for her, she stayed silent, afraid of suffering the same fate. Imagine being so cold at only 6 years old. The Jordina family warned her that if she didn't prove herself useful, she would face the same fate. Since then she had been working hard in fencing to prove her worth. She said that all they had to do was win the upcoming hunting festival. Defeating Delphine, the strongest at the academy, wouldn't be easy, but since it was a team competition, Ian believed they had a chance. The scene then shifted to the green-haired girl, who informed the tall blonde that her sister would be participating in the festival. The blonde replied that she would have to finish her off once and for all. The next chapter began with Ian thinking about going back to his room to see if he had received a new letter. But that annoying girl wouldn't leave his side, tugging at his sleeve, asking if he wanted to have breakfast together. He thought he could check for the letter later, so he agreed, but just then Celine Hastur appeared, wanting to know if they had finished their morning training. Sakria greeted her politely, but Celine immediately demanded to know what this business of inviting him to breakfast was about. Apparently those two always ate breakfast together. Celine crushed his arm with her strength and pulled him toward her. But Ian asked, since when they had been having breakfast together. At that moment, Sakria grabbed his other arm. The two girls started arguing, both putting everything they had into it. Celine asked what Sakria wanted with her Ian, but Sakria told her to let go of his arm. Now the two of them were about to. When it comes to fighting, they're useless, but when it comes to arguing over a boy, they fight like two wild dogs. And Celine doesn't make things any better. She tells Sakria that the only reason she gets help is because Ian feels sorry for her, since she has no friends. Ian immediately replies that he never said anything like that. Sakria, however, doesn't seem to believe him and says she always knew Celine wasn't a good person, that she was probably the kind of person who talked badly about others behind their backs. Then Sakria harshly scolds her, saying it's disgusting to see her with such an inferiority complex. And if that wasn't enough, she plays dirty, adding that if Ian only stays with Sakria because she looks miserable, then she'll be miserable forever and the two of them will remain together. My God, the girls were ready to draw their swords and cause chaos right there in the middle of the academy. But Ian just walked away, saying he wanted the two weirdos to leave him alone. The worst decision possible, really, because a logical man would have chosen to stay with both. That would have been the valid option. Instead, the lady magnet who actually only attracts trouble was now talking with Leto. Leto commented that those two girls really wouldn't leave him alone. He never imagined his friend would have two beautiful girls fighting over him. It was insane. Still, he understood Celine's side, since she probably didn't know how to handle a rival suddenly appearing. Ian, as always, was clueless, and when he asked what Leto meant, Leto replied that he really had no idea about anything. Ian then pressed him about the investigation, but Leto said it would still take about a week. How could it take a whole week to find a fourth-year girl with green hair? That didn't sound complicated at all. Half an hour would have been enough. Then out of nowhere, Ian asked Leto if he was starting to believe in the letters from the future. Leto was confused, so Ian said he'd show him, but when Ian pulled the letter out, Leto couldn't see anything. Ian told him to touch it, but then realized the truth. Only he could make contact with it and only he could see it. Leto suggested maybe Ian had been cursed or something, which was why he was seeing it, but Ian insisted it had to be real since that was how he had learned about Emma's accident. He also knew that during the upcoming hunting festival, a powerful magical beast would appear. Leto brushed it off, saying it was normal for strong creatures and strong students to appear at such events, which didn't exactly line up with what Ian was saying. Ian noticed that whenever he tried to explain the contents of the letters, others couldn't really understand, so Leto theorized that if the letters really did exist, Ian was probably being affected by some sort of time distortion or incomprehensible magic. Moreover, everything the letters mentioned seemed intended to prevent crises. Still, even if they were real, Leto said, such power would be nearly impossible to use. Everyone knew it was extremely difficult to change the order of the future, since doing so would change the entire order of the world. Ian remembered that Emma had told him something similar. Leto then mentioned the most obvious paradox. If Ian received a letter from the future warning him about a beast, the moment he killed that beast in the present, it would erase its existence in the future, creating an endless time loop that would eventually collapse. That was why no one messed with such magic. It was dangerous enough to destroy the world. So, if Ian was involved in this, he could very well be someone who might destroy everything. Ian didn't want to believe it, but Leto said it was just one possibility and that he should be careful. At least it seemed clear that whoever was sending the letters was trying to prevent disaster. Still, the so-called Lady Magnet, already insecure, now grew more afraid that he might actually bring destruction. He was just a boy, not even from this country. How could he handle all of this alone? For now, he decided there wasn't much he could do. But right at that moment, someone stepped on his back and called out to him. When he turned, a girl in a hat asked if he was the one who had beaten up her little brother. She looked even smaller than expected, but came closer confidently. Behind her stood a gang, now blocking Ian's path. That's when he noticed Lupin standing off to the side, looking terrified. Ian now realized who the big sister Lupin had mentioned really was. She and Lil said they wouldn't stand by after he had messed with one of their family members. So, how many chapters do you think it will take before she's blushing beside him, trembling? I'd bet it'll happen before this one ends. It turned out she was the leader of one of the Academy's biggest factions. Ian figured that even though the Saint had told everyone not to get involved, this girl still insisted on picking a fight. His plan for now was maybe to just let them beat him up a little so the matter would end there. But at that moment they heard a cracking sound. Looking back, they saw someone collapsed on the ground. Another powerful presence was approaching. Slowly, another figure came closer. Another strong girl had arrived. Then Delphinardina stepped forward, ordering the newcomer to stop acting so arrogantly in front of the other students, saying it was disgraceful. She replies that as always, she's rude, and the two of them start throwing sparks at each other. Meanwhile, the protagonist is off to the side, not understanding how this even happened. Out of nowhere, there are two girls fighting in front of him, and he doesn't even know them. Since that's the case, he decides to leave, but Romano grabs his shoulder and asks where he thinks he's going. It would be better if he wasn't thinking about running away. The protagonist is already considering grabbing his big axe and smashing it right into someone's face. Suddenly one of the girls shouts and Elsie says that Delphine must be trying to spend some time with that boy. However, she finds it strange that she'd want to have fun with him after he already did everything he wanted with her little sister. What the hell? They're slandering Ian Percus here. He's been doing everything he can to run away from women and now they're saying this. But then right at that moment, there's a loud crack. He pulls first and he warns Elsie to think twice about what she's saying. She can insult him, but she better not involve Sakria, or she'll pay a heavy price. The little witch panics and immediately calls for her people to protect her, but the protagonist strikes the first guy straight in the mouth, sending him to the ground. The second fool comes at him with a big sword, but Ian dodges, blocks with his axe, and slashes back. Down goes another one. He glares to the side and manages to dodge a lightning strike. The bastard even smiles, saying he's excited for a fair fight against her. Elsie tells him he must be out of his mind if he thinks he can win, but he only answers that he's willing to try and charges forward. In a blink, he's already behind her. He lands a hit, but she defends. I thought he was about to take a direct blow and face plant into the ground. Honestly, part of his spirit must have awakened because when it comes to fighting women, the boy practically teleports. Elsie tells him to give up, insisting he won't break her shield, but he just responds that he's excited to see how long it can last. She reinforces her shield, calling him delusional if he really thinks he can break through. He may have a few decent moves, but he's still only in his third year and doesn't stand a chance. But then he throws his sword like a boomerang, startling her. When she turns around, he's already inside the shield's range and slams her head into the ground. He raises his massive axe, aiming the sharp edge down. She quickly lifts her shield, which begins to crack. The girl is in disbelief, muttering that it can't be possible, that he's really about to beat her. She's supposed to be the best magic user in the academy, yet he keeps hammering away while she desperately searches for the perfect opening to end the fight. But her shield finally shatters. Trembling, she breaks down crying, begging for help. Still, Ian isn't about to forgive someone who tried to ruin his reputation as the Academy's virgin. He lifts the axe high, telling her that since she started this, she has to finish it, and to give her life with honor. He slams the blade down beside her head and warns her that next time she won't be so lucky. Damn, when it comes to women, this boy doesn't mess around. No wonder that when the spirit possessed his body, it went around beating all of them. Now I want to see if this talent runs in his blood because Delphine suddenly asks if he can spend some time with her. Huh? I didn't quite get that. She says it, but then the scene shifts to Lido, who hears that the axe maniac struck again. The protagonist might get in trouble, but Leto tells everyone to calm down. Ines wants to know about his conversation with Miss Delphine. He says nothing happened yet, but they're supposed to meet later tonight. Then he asks Leto who started spreading those rumors about Sakria. At that moment his friend pulls out a letter and tells him to read it. Seeing Ian's calm reaction, Leto says he's more composed than expected. The protagonist replies that he doesn't even know why himself. He already had some suspicions, but now he knows it's because of something he didn't reveal. Leto asks what exactly he's planning to do, and Ian answers that it depends on what kind of responses they get. Meanwhile, we see Sakria in the forest, probably reflecting on the blows he took for her, realizing once again that the boy fought for her. Oh my god, Ian is so incredible. And just as she's thinking of him, who shows up but the boy himself, asking why she looks so sad. Damn girl, all she does is cry now. She says she doesn't want him to worry so much about her, claiming she only causes trouble. Please, someone just take this girl to his room already, so she'll stop whining and dragging this romance out. She hesitates, then asks, "Can I give you a hug?" What? Hold on. Boom. Too late, it happens. Oh my god, what's going on? A girl is touching me. He calls her name, startling her, and she quickly pulls away. Let me remind you, the protagonist is 23 years old. He's not 14, not 12, 23 years old, blushing because a girl hugged him. That's why I keep reading those Chinese works where they spend 10 million per second on women and take them all to bed to balance things out. In the middle of all this back and forth, they notice a sepia flower on the ground. Tomato Cheeks comments that it should only appear in the north and she's never seen one, so, just like that, in the south. At that moment, Silver remembers that Sepia is the name, or rather the nickname, of the person who has been sending the letters. To take advantage of the opportunity, he asks Sakria if she likes the flower, and she replies yes because her mother liked it very much and that is why she likes it as well. Immediately Yan begins to wonder if perhaps in the future she named herself after that flower and if she is in fact the one sending the letters. But then, why would she try to hide her name? Either way, whoever it is, this flower is important to her. Besides that, he knows he just needs to remain calm, since during the hunting festival he will get closer to this person, even if he doesn't fully remember. But could Sepia really be Sakria? If that were the case, then she would be the one he marries in the future. He shakes his head, saying that even if the letter is reliable, she is still just a junior. He cannot allow himself to be distracted by her and must focus on what needs to be done. Although in reality the only thing he has been doing so far is beating up people because of her. Then he asks if it is already certain that Miss Delphine will succeed the House of Erdina, and whether Sakria herself has any chance at all. To this she replies that she has neither the qualifications nor the ability to be the successor, so there's no way for her to compete. Her older sister holds all the real power and the whole family supports her. However, the protagonist suggests that maybe she is simply being kept on a leash, since she is also a daughter of the Erdina family. In theory, a fight between the sisters would be the most normal thing to expect, but Sakria admits she has never had the courage to challenge her sister. She has always stayed quiet, obeyed, and did everything she was told. Her sister always said she wasn't useful enough for the family and that, when necessary, she would be discarded. That is why she always remained so apprehensive. Now the first real chance she sees to challenge her sister will be at this hunting festival, but the girl is already blushing, wanting to know why he's asking her all this. He places a hand on her shoulder and says that eventually and maybe even during this event she will have to fight her sister, and all he wants to know is what kind of person she really is. Later that night, in the hall of Aedalos, a man greets our boy and offers to show him to his room. The protagonist already knows that visiting her like this, in the middle of the night, will spark some very interesting rumors. He arrives at the door, opens it, and immediately blushes. The girl was waiting for him with little clothing and a lot of exposure. He must already be questioning how he's supposed to protect his chastity in a situation like this. He even tells her that it would be better if she changed into something more professional for their conversation. She asks if she looks that ugly and he replies no, she looks beautiful. With that, she thanks him and tells him to sit down quickly. While sitting, he warns her that she should be more careful with the clothes she wears around men, but she says she doesn't care about that. Seeing beautiful things makes people want to have them, and the body of a woman like hers is one of those things. Most women protect themselves because being desired is dangerous. However, in this academy, nobody can defeat her, and nobody can have her, so it doesn't matter what they think. The girl already had a whole speech written out, huh? Our boy just sat there awkwardly, but he still says he must look like an idiot because he was born in the countryside, just a simple boy. She tells him to get used to it quickly, since this will become part of his daily life. And now he's already wondering, why does he feel like she's trying to seduce him? If he had any doubts before, now it's obvious. She leans in and says she wants him, the boy with the axe, as her ally. She had never met someone as bold as him, especially someone who beat the strongest witch in the academy. Yes, the protagonist is confused. He doesn't understand why this girl is doing all this, and her excuse seems weak. There's definitely something more behind it, and no need to even mention, she clearly wants an axe strike. At this point, he asks if she knows that Sarah has been bullied recently. She replies that people have become bold. They are no longer respecting the Ordina family. The protagonist then reveals that he discovered a certain student who has zero personal information about Sakria, but he confirmed that this same person has been entering and leaving this exact dormitory. The blonde asks him to be clearer, and he says that's fine. He already knows that the person spreading information about Sakria must be from the Ordina family, someone with enough connections to influence countless people into acting while nobody dares to speak her name. And considering all that, he knows the only one who fits the description is none other than Delphine Ordina herself. The blonde smirks, saying she thought he was a bit dumber than this, but it seems he was prepared. Still, why would she do something so cruel against the little sister she claims to love so much? Ian replies that it's because she knows she's going to be challenged during the hunting festival. Delphine laughs, and says that while that might be possible, he has no evidence. The protagonist answers that they could just ask the green-haired girl, yet another woman, for him to beat up, since he's not exactly shy about that. At this, Delphine says there's no need to go that far. She admits it directly, she was indeed the one behind everything. She was planning to let her sister do whatever she wanted, but then she had to bring up this whole thing about challenging her at the hunting festival. That is why she needs to make it clear why no one can challenge the master. The protagonist says that doesn't make sense. She only wants to prove her worth. However, Delphine interrupts and asks directly if he wants to become her ally or not. The crowd did not expect the boy to have such incredible skills. But at that moment, what happens? Out of nowhere, he swings his axe, declaring that he has to refuse. Working with someone as fake as her would be the worst thing. He refused out of sheer anger. However, she only laughed, asking if her plans were really that obvious. Suddenly, she already has a knife close to his neck, warning him that if she wanted, she could end this right now. Ian is surprised that she had a hidden weapon tucked inside that little amount of fabric. She explains that of course she always keeps a little protection, but she is interested in him since she realized that he does not hesitate. Oh boy, just throw that coat over your shoulder already. This is ruining my channel. And if her sister already played aggressively, this one went further, saying she wanted to train him like a hunting dog. Shocked, he tells her she will regret it. She responds that the only day she will regret anything is the day she is defeated by someone else. However, their conversation ends there because it is time for him to return. He cannot hold back and strikes with his axe again, this time coming with the blade, but she locks eyes with him, spins, and makes the axe only graze her lightly. He had truly gone in with the intent to cut her down. She apologizes, but he still has a lot to learn. Then he launches another attack, throwing his axe upward. She thinks it was a good attempt and that it might have worked on someone else, but now it was time to crush his will and courage. I do not know exactly what happened, but the cup fell to the ground. She had the knife at his throat, but he countered with a reversed arm swing of his sword, even though it was clumsy. Her clothes kept slipping down. Pull them up, girl. She is impressed that he managed to create a counterattack after sending the axe upward. She then says it is funny that they call him the Prince of the Axe. How cringe. His main weapon, after all, was actually the sword. She asks if he is really trying to kill her there because she can sense his intent, but he simply replies that putting the strongest girl in the academy in such a position was enough for him. She bites her lip in anger, thinking she never should have ended up in such a risky situation. Then she decides it is time to act seductively. And well, if there is one attack Ian cannot resist, you already know which one it is. Look at what happens. He glances back and suddenly she is blushing, trying to cover herself after her bold move. At that moment, someone outside asks if they can come in, saying they hear a lot of noise. Ian pushes Delphine away to create some distance. A maid opens the door, sees the peculiar scene, immediately apologizes and runs away. And if her sister blushed a little, this one turns even redder. Ian crouches down to take another sly glance, but then quickly leaves, says goodnight, and shuts the door. Obviously, the new lunatic is left behind, acting all peculiar, probably drawing little hearts in her notes. Next scene, everyone in the academy is gossiping about the crazy axe wielder who threatened an unarmed senior. Apparently, the boy has been in the academy for 3 years, and no one ever imagined he was this insane. Suddenly Ian appears behind them and tells them to stop talking. The two weirdos scatter immediately. He thinks at least his bad reputation is helping him earn respect. Still, one thing is undeniable. His life has changed drastically recently. At that moment he is walking through another part of the academy and sees some people wetting the wall. There are only 12 days left before the hunting festival begins. Since he wants to participate, he wants to register soon. In theory he needs 4 people. For now he only has himself and Sakria. Ideally the team should be him, Sakria, Leto and Celine, but what is he planning? Well, at the very least, he wants a mage on the team. But nope, the guy is ready to ditch his friend. He really abandons Leto, saying there is no way he wants him on the team. That's it, kid, you're out. The protagonist insists, but Leto resists. Now I doubt he will insist as much when it comes to Celine. He mentions that he needs a mage, and Leto says just listen, because he has an idea. Surely it is time for that girl L6, the little witch from before. I bet she would fall in love within a chapter, but I was wrong. Who guessed 3 or 4 chapters, and got it right? And in the next chapter we see her scolding someone, saying that just because she lost once that doesn't mean her power weakened. The guy apologizes while nervously conjuring energy balls to attack, but our boy didn't do that. And well, right then someone calls her, but she tells them to shut up and not interrupt until she's done or else.